Good evening, folks. How are you doing? A few in. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to give me a bit of an heads up. All right. Slipknot, how do? Can you hear me? Evening. Good evening. You can hear me good. That's excellent. Okay, so I thought we might start where we ended on the last one, which was just a little look at the follow-up from when our Queen is removed from the public. So it said this is a Daily Express report from the 13th of this month, and it says Prince Charles will not pass crown to William after Queen. It will be very different. Oh, damn right, it's going to be different, I would suggest. Which is why it's important people recognise we need the coronation oath to be taken as is expected on King James. Nothing else. No additions, no takeaways, just as is. So it says Prince Charles, 72, is first in line to the throne when the Queen dies, but has been facing calls to let Prince William take over as head of state. Prince of Wales is the oldest heir apparent in British history. British? You mean English? Bit of bad grammar there. Daily Express is the monarch of England and Scotland, though Scotland might say different, and they do have their own law, Roman law. Royal expert Jonathan Sacerdote, has said there is no strong argument for Prince Charles to let the crown go to William. Speaking to express.co.uk, Mr. Sacerdote said, I don't think there's strong argument for it, and I think that Prince Charles will be a different kind of monarch to his mother, and William will be a different kind of monarch to his father and grandmother. I think there is no chance that Prince Charles will be king for as long as his mother. It's just statistically and mathematically impossible. It will be very different reign in just that respect. But I don't see why he should pass the crown downwards, and I don't think that would be desirable from anyone's point of view. He'll bring to the role his own agenda. Well, that's interesting, because in one of the previous videos from last year, did I not present a nice little image of a Mr. Rothschild giving it the lowdown to Charlie Boy, telling him exactly what is to do, with Charles looking like a 5-year-old sheepish and very naughty boy. So his own agenda, Daily Express, your investigative journalism is absolute garbage, I do have to say. So he won't be bringing his own agenda, he'll be bringing the agenda as dictated by Mr. Rothschild. It wasn't Jacob, it's the other one. Yeah, I can't remember his name offhand. I might have it for you later. It's not going to be a surprise when Charles is king. That's how they've been planning it for years. I'm sure they must have conversations amongst themselves about the wider agenda of the royal family and the short-term aims of it. Well, I fully expected this to be a report by Charles. It would appear it's by some geezer. They might have already had conversations about where each of them will take the monarchy. Well, they take the monarchy according to the British Constitution and nothing else. So what do you mean, where you will take the monarchy? You can't take it anywhere. It lives here, yeah, on England, and it's got all the rules it needs to tell it what it can't do. So what kind of nonsense is that? Are they telegraphing, programming you to accept nonsense? I suppose it depends how many of our foreign brothers and sisters they have in here who may just stick their hands up and go, yes, miss. Well, of course, people better become aware of this, because they're certainly pushing the Queen out now more and more in how ill she is, how she's not doing this, she's not doing that. It's coming. It's coming. It comes as royal expert Stuart Peace has explained how Charles could step aside and let the Duke of Cambridge take his place. Speaking to royalty, on Us Weekly, Mr. Pearce said, we know the position here is about to inherit, it's going to be very interesting to see if Prince Charles will sit in the throne. In the throne. Is that a shift, a grammar from on? In the throne. I don't know. I don't think I've come across that before. Or will he create some form of a shift in constitutional law? Can he do that? I don't think so. Not without the full consent of Englishmen and Scottishmen. Or, form shifting constitutional law to allow his son to sit on the throne. That's going to be very interesting. He said, at the moment, the right of ascendancy is Charles on the throne, but I don't necessarily see Queen Camilla. He added, constitutional law would be revoked and changed because, after all, we're living in extraordinary times. Ooh, can you see that? I hope Graham moves on to this. Charles has been stepping into the Queen's shoes since her 95th birthday. I'll probably verify that because I think that's when he stopped running the Duchy of Lancaster up here, and it was took over by the Grosvenors. Speaking to Palace, which is IBM, just thought to say. Speaking to Palace Confidential on Mail Plus, royal commentator Richard Eden said Palace officials have been very keen to play down the idea of a summit Charles has called with Prince William to plot the future. Plot the future. A plotting monarch. Is that allowed? But they will be having lots of conversations when the Queen is 95. By definition, it will be a transition of some effect. Charles will be with her at all those big events, such as the state opening of Parliament. So there you go. That's what they're sort of pre-programming the old English and the Scottish to accept. So they're going to change things, are they? Oh, constitutional revoking. Oh, I see, says I. I don't think that's going to go down very well with anybody. So where are we now? I've got lost. There we go. So what do you think of that? Anybody? Yeah, evening to everybody. Okay then. So some of you have probably heard of this. The subject matter I've put together for today. But it actually has its beginnings in 458 BC. And I think if we follow from this point, we can actually see how this very uber racist ideology, which were thrust aside on many an occasion, by definition of its own doctrines and its history, we can start to get an idea how it starts to peek back. It shows its little face back in all three of the biblical religions, which I thought is interesting. Now, as I said, you've probably heard of this. The guy who it gets to at the 1700s. So in 458 BC, one day in this year, the petty Palestinian tribe of Judah, did you get that? Palestinian tribe, okay, earlier disowned by the Israelites, produced a racial creed, the disruptive effect of which on subsequent human affairs may have exceeded that of explosives or epidemics. That was the day on which the theory of the master race was set up as the law. And that comes from a book, The Controversy of Zion, by a guy called Douglas Reed, and that were written in 1951. And the Schofield Bible is in sync with that also, which is then the rise of Zionism as we all understand it. But obviously the creed upon which these political organizations are rooted has its root back in 458 BC. Okay, so that I thought was rather interesting. Now, there's another incursion, but it's an actual incursion first into established Jewry in the 1700s, and in the form of a schism. And it came out of a strange Kabbalistic cult that would herald as its leader the long-awaited precursor or pathmaker Messiah for the takeover of the entire globe by that creed that was formed in 458 BC. Okay, so some of these topics we've covered in some of my videos previously, but it's an interesting chronology. So I put this together through 2018 and published it in November of 2018. And it did turn out rather an interesting insight as to something crept in again and re-embedded itself. So if we jump then from 458 to the 1100, okay, and so we're looking here now, we've got crusades on. So we've got Western Jewry of its day, moving out of the West and the Christians into the Middle East, fighting all the Muslims, etc., etc. So that's been going on. We're now at 1100 AD, and by 1192, the Templar Order honours the Treaty of Ramia of 1192 between King Richard the Lionheart and the Sultan Saladin, which declared peace and essentially united the Templars with the Knights of Saladin. All right. So then, if we take the other Sunday's stuff where the insiders suggested that the Rothschilds, we could see them as the Knights Templar of our day. Yeah. Those are then trapped through money, fiat, banking, interest. That's what he's saying if you get my drift there. So then in 1192, a pact was made by the Rothschilds of the day with what we might say as the Muslims of the Middle East in that day. So that is an interesting point because, of course, I've discussed many times that what I found is that the Templars were actually invited in, led to the treasures, given the keys to work in the systems that they came back with, but did leave the last sort of thing they said to the Templars was, we've given you the keys to the cross, but we are the only people that know the true meaning of it. So they're bringing something that's not Western Christian into Christendom, the Templars, okay? So we have a schism there, and that's coming in off the back of the Crusades. That key treaty was restored and reconfirmed by the Treaty of Acre of 1229 between Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II and Saladin's successor Al-Kamil, supporting mutual cooperation of the Knights Templar with Muslim Saracens in preserving holy sites and heritage. Of course it was. Okay, so there we can see something distinct from what we had in what we call Christendom, which would have been under Rome at those times, because of course the Reformation happened. So straight away from the Crusades, not only did they make a right mess across Europe and of course the British Isles, by just basically taking all the land and properties, etc., through creating trusts, etc., blah, blah, blah. We've been through that. And then sent all the young guys off to go and slaughter themselves. So there you go. Major incursion, I would suggest, in 1192, and from that time, by something other than what we would have expected. Now it jumps up to 1400. We've discussed the Prussians, especially as relates to Catherine the Great. But that's in the 1700s. Again, the same time as this other incursion we're going to have a look at takes effect. So in 1400, on the 21st of February, the Prussian Confederation is formed. Okay, so the Prussians as a group, as a confederation, that's come together in 1400. Yeah, so that's something major to keep it, to recognise that happened. So that 1400, that's quite a time ago. In 1491, San Ignacio de Loyola was born in the Basque province of Guepuzcoa, Spain. His parents were Maranos, and at that time of his birth, the family was very wealthy. Okay. So everybody's going, well, oh, racist negative. Yeah, but just because they're in that area doesn't mean, and he's clearly a Marano. Yeah, so he's not of the Basques. So again, can you see how they just put this together, and at first thing you're linking things that are not necessarily linked. And then in 1492, the Jewish expulsion from Spain, which you need to look into that a bit, and it's complete con that there were more going on there, and it were more about spreading things around for this shift and move over into a wholesale takeover of the Americas, basically. So 1492, first known Illuminati order Alumbrado was founded in 1492 by Spanish crypto Jews called Marranos. Okay, so back in those days, the Marranos were called crypto Jews. So we can still see a distinct lead here between Judah and its 458 declaration. We can see Solomon coming back into the West via, well, so not back into the West, but into the West via the Templars, and then the connections with the Saracens of that day as well. So the first known Illuminati order, so this is before Weishaupt, okay? Because as I've said before, Illuminati is a bit misconstrued because it's more of a system of how to create a secret society, you know, or a power grid, a power pyramid, if you will. So this was the first one was in 1492 by Spanish crypto Jews called Marranos. They were a Jewish sect that feigned conversion to Catholicism and formed their own mystical version of Christianity, yet more in line with Freemasonic theology. Interestingly also is the fact Ignatius of Loyola, while studying at Salamanca in 1527, was brought before an ecclesiastical commission on a charge of sympathy with the Alumbrados. So there's obviously then a clear connection between this Ignatius Loyola and this magical sect of Alumbrados, who history terms as the first sort of order that used this particular pyramidal system. But he escaped with the admonition. Miguel de Molinos was also accused of sympathy owing to some similarities between his book, The Spiritual Guide, and the teachings of the early Alumbrados. Isabel de la Cruz and Pedro Rias de Alcaraz, Loyola was the head of the original Society of Jesus. So there you've got a connection then to the Jesuits of being formed not of necessarily the Roman Church, but it back connects to the Templars. As I've said before, in my opinion, from what I've studied, this Illuminati system is just a rebirthing of what was the Templar system. Yeah, the Temple of Solomon. And here it shows itself again as it's shoving itself into Rome. It says 1494, the first evidence of Jews in Tudor England, and this is after the expulsion by Edward I. Although I know they were expelled, but they didn't all go. A lot of them feigned like they've done here, the sort of Marano kind of situation, and there were quite a few still left here in England. And the might of the Stanleys and those families are also in play at this time. So how they took it, they took basically the throne away from the Plantagenets and shoved it onto what you can trace as a very dark line coming from Belgium. And you can see it in John O'Gorn, who looks nothing like his brothers or his father, supposedly, who were ginger nuts. Whereas John O'Gorn was dark as they come. And then you've got Swineford, these strange ladies that you don't get that much about. And this, so you can see a strain that's kept itself in here. Now, of course, everybody says it's the Jews, blah, blah, blah. Well, what we're going to move to further is how The schism that attacked existing Jewry at that time in the 1700s was attacked by this same stream, although through another guise, but it also then affected Islam and the Catholic Church again. So we can see it's like incursions at different times, kind of thing. 15 AD, 1500. 1515, Pope Leo X, the Medici Pope, opened the door for usury on loans after pressure from the German Fuggerbank. Right, so the Fuggerbank sort of put pressure on a Medici Pope, Pope Leo X, to expand usury. So you can see there that through the Holy See families, which the Medici was one of the powers, in fact, if it wasn't the power, it certainly was a major player for the ruling bloodline, because it was so, especially through Catherine de Medici as well, but we'll not get into that. So there you have a link with Pope Leo X, a Medici Pope, and the Fuggerbank of Germany, which I would suggest at this point would be more Prussian than perhaps German. So who are these Prussians, you know? 1527, Ignatius Loyola, while studying in Salamanca, was brought before the Ecclesiastical Commission on a charge of sympathy with the Almoravids. Well, we've come across that. 1588, the Converso, a Moor of medieval Spain and Portugal who professed to convert to Christianity in order to avoid persecution or expulsion. That's the description of a Converso. Dr. Hector Noon was lauded as a hero for being the first to warn of the sailing of the Spanish Armada. In 1589, Christopher Marlowe anti-Jewish play The Jew of Malta was first performed. So you can see then through using play, the sort of natives here are starting to see this takeover going on in England, and we haven't got to Henry VIII yet. No, we have actually. Sorry, my apologies. So we are, yeah. And yeah, because you look at Henry VIII, and you look at not the pictures you get in history books, but if you look at some of the images of him as a child, he was very dark. You know, like maybe perhaps from this, again, this strain that had been brought in, sort of thing. Definitely a lot done under the Tudors, but the fact that they took it away from the Plantagenets is really what actually went on there. 1594, Queen Elizabeth I's physician, a converso named Dr. Rodrigo Lopez, was implicated in a plot to assassinate Elizabeth. He was tortured, tried, and hanged on what was suspected to be a false charge of treason. Anglo Jewry then fled to the Low Countries, often disguised as Spanish or Portuguese Roman Catholics. Elizabeth I was financed by the House Pallavicini, and the role was to build the navy to attack, piracy actually, to attack the Spanish galleons, bringing all the goodies back from South America. Now, the House Pallavicini, they operate for the Farnese, which is both Holy See connected families, the Farnese being a Holy See family. But we also have to take into consideration what the insider told us, which was basically, if you can see it, it's still of the puppet. So that again is interesting, you know. Although Dr. John Coleman gave you some serious names of families that I don't think anybody had ever heard of, unless you were already up there in that mix, operating power for the powerful. So who knows, maybe it might be wise to revisit Dr. John Coleman's work, because he did name some seriously old and ancient family names, or, you know, house names, using the Fondi, where they all pull together, you know. So that could be sort of, because he said, didn't he, that they're not often named in history, so doesn't mean they haven't been named. So that's interesting. But Pallavicini operated for the House Farnese in this on England, and were in full support of the Tudors, because they financed the Stanleys, and so then they moved on to Elizabeth I, and obviously created the Navy. So that was interesting. 1597, William Shakespeare's famous play about a Jewish moneylender, The Merchants of Venice was premiered. So you can see by this time, the natives here, the English, can see that things aren't good, and we haven't had the Civil War yet. Do you know what I'm saying? So when we get to the Civil War time, you can see basically that the Civil War was this that has crept in, finally removing our Christian monarch as power and putting in this democracy, this shite thing called democracy, or at least the beginnings of it, by putting parliaments as supreme. Right, it breaks there to 1600, so I'll come back to you guys and see if you've got any questions. Hello to everybody. I think the point is the religion of gravity. I'm just in response to what you're saying. I think what we all need to get to grips with is it doesn't matter which religion you're pushing or part of today. None of them are operating according to your own original doctrines. Now, if you can start to see that, it doesn't mean you have to not be what you think you are, what you believe you are. It just means you can separate yourself from, hang on a minute, if something else is controlling that, and it's using my energy, my time to accomplish it, then surely a man, be you male or female, can recognize that that's then on you to have a look, because you don't want to be pushing contrary to what you believe you're pushing. Nobody does. So we're all in the same pot, is what I'm trying to say. The puppets want us all to go against each other because, of course, then they carry on. They lose nothing and gain everything. Because each time nonsense occurs, they just put more draconian power in for themselves, and then the jackboot comes out. You've got to see it in these terms. There are no winners if this goes as they want it to go. Full fascist jackboot lockdown, end of all freedoms. They've got the sunshine and rain in the mix. So basically everything you do then would be classed as it's putting out this funny gas that everybody's shitting themselves off these days, even though the trees eat it and therefore need it. It just doesn't make sense, because especially when they're promoting veganism, all the plants need that gas that can never be mentioned. You're going to have no food, vegans. It's gone. You know, at the moment they're happy because you've got you eating shit that's sprayed to death. It's all sprayed to death. So they're happy and comfortable at that. But eventually, you know, can't happen because they're not be growing. Because they haven't got any gas. What are you going to eat? There'll be no moo cows. You know, no moo cows, just sheep. Sheep and goats. That's all you're allowed. So what are you going to eat then? Each other? I'd like to see how you twist that around from veganism to cannibalism. That would be very interesting. Anyway, popping on here. Inmates. Inmates, eh? That's a good one. Open prison. Well, you're under house arrest. When they lock you down, you're under house arrest. All these mandates, you know, they're using the term held down. They're bullshit. You're under house arrest. You're under occupation. Don't you see that? The franchise changes each time you get a new name. Now we're under a franchise that uses Corporation United Kingdom to govern you as bankrupt assets belonging to a bankrupt government company. But you know what I know, this fellow inmates, I quite like that. Well, you don't forget to like it, guys. It gets me kudos. Right, I've stopped monetizing these live streams. I watched one the other day, and I've never seen so many adverts. It's ridiculous. Anyway, Rulers of Evil, Tepesosa. You do have to be careful though as well with these books. You know, a lot of stuff that's thrust on Freemasonry per se isn't, if you actually get into it. So again, with all these books, I mean, and I try and put a lot on my website if I can find them and they're in decent condition, because So much has gone off the internet now. So I just think, well, if I've got it as a file on the internet, on my website, it can be accessed. But you do have to be careful. And especially in these Masonic books, so called, because there's a lot of codes in them. So there's a lot of numerology stuff going on and reversals. So you really can't read it verbatim and come away and think you understand it. Because if you're thinking that everything in that book has moved you to a position of truth, you really are not. You've got to be careful. Be careful. The muscle to exercise is just discernment. And if it doesn't feel right, I mean, it's only jingle jangle, but it satisfies something, other than a feeling. No, don't go with it. Just be careful. Because Freemasonry is the scapegoat for everything Rome's done. Yeah, and it's perfect because Freemasonry is synonymous with Protestantism. Now, I'm not saying Protestantism hasn't got its problems. I mean, some of them are fruit bats. They have absolutely zero morality, and they might even go to church over back in the day. But no, it's not. With everything's got its problems, is what I'm trying to say. But while you're looking at the other group's problems, you're not looking at your own, and vice versa. And then you've just got it all projecting shit everywhere, vomiting, projectile vomit of your own character, your own fears onto other people. Some people, it's they need it because that's where they're at, but not everybody. And if you can't run your life like that, because you'll never trust anything, you'll never be able to move forward if your mind's going to dismantle every idea, or not idea, every intuition you get. If you get an intuition, don't let your mind undo it. And if it does, recognize that that's what's just happened. You know what I'm saying? This is like recognition kind of tackle, which the Buddhist teaching is very big on. And it's about recognizing your own mechanics. So when stimuli comes before you, realize your own mechanic. How does that affect you? So if you see a bit of pap, recognize what it does for you. If it's immense and that's it, you want to go and have sex with somebody, you've got a serious problem there. If it just titillates you a little bit. But if you recognize your own reactions to stimuli that you get, whatever it is you're into, you'll see your immediate reaction, and that's your subconscious program reaction to that stimuli. Do you get what I'm saying? And that's the mechanic you have to start to recognize in yourself if you want to start to grasp your own ritual that you're unaware of because you're not seeing it. Everybody else sees it because they know you as that. But it's interesting how you get to grips with that. You can really push forward. Right. Yeah, we're in deep shit because of everybody's sucked on to the bullshit, the creeping in bit, the shit bit, the nonsense bit. So, I mean, and Azida said it's done. It is done, but it doesn't mean it's a done deal because it's done as a system set up, but it's only a done deal if everybody falls for it and goes stupid. And there's a few signs of that in America. This idea they've got going over there about defunding, deplatforming the police. I mean, that's just ludicrous. You've just seen this total fake up, this written back, whatever it's called, trial. What a complete call. I mean, have you seen some of the videos out there showing it's CGI? Feet are going missing. You're looking, so just look at some of that, analysing that case, and they're basically saying it was just theatre. Which I'm not saying, I couldn't be bothered to look into it, to be honest. I'm not really bothered, but if they're onto it like that and they're showing a bit of data, it's worth having a look at least anyway, because they can actually now control everything just by a bit of theatre and wazzing it on telly. And everybody goes for it. Genoese Fonda, yes, the Genoese. Well, the Genoese and the Venetians, they're the Phoenicians. And let's not kid ourselves, back in the Byzantine days, the Venetians actually hung Vatican Rome out to dry by basically almost allowing the Persians to go in and they worked against that. So these Venetians are not friendly. They're not friendly at all. And there's been a lot written about the Venetians, the Venetian Party of the North, the new Venetian Party of the North, as it is today. There's this younger generation took it over. And of course, Dr. John Coleman, perfect for bringing to your attention the might of the Venetians. And of course, if you want other tidbits, then you've got some of the offshoots that come off the LaRouche stuff. Because not all of it's garbage, but they're giving you a shed load of truth and then selling lies, which I saw when I used to tottle about on the UK Column Forum when he first began. Because some of the idiots that are involved with that, it were quite comical, you know, trying to push this shit garbage about how great Roosevelt were, and people like this, and I'm like, well, no. And then I'd put on a load of stuff, and they were spamming me and all sorts. But so you can get it. There is one guy that left LaRouche. What's he called? He's well known. I can't remember his name. He's brilliant, actually. The sad thing about them people is they're very Marxist. They're very left wing. It's quite ridiculous. You know, too Marxist for my liking. Yeah. Lab grown meats. Well, they're on with that, aren't they? Haven't they been doing that for quite a bit? I think McDonald's is probably the uber test place for it, isn't it, really? And KFC, I mean, I remember when KFC first came out in the 70s, were it, maybe? It was the most delicious tasting dinner you could ever have. The taste of the actual secret recipe so far, it hasn't been like that for the last 30 years. It's absolute garbage, isn't it? A lot of people eat it, though. Again, we like when you say Swiss, Venetians, you know, yeah, but you've got to also remember that we're talking about the elites of those countries, that not everybody in that country is playing along to that tune. You know, it doesn't do us any justice if we use a nation's name to accuse of what the elite that have took over it are doing. A bit like the inner city of London. That's the British Empire on England, not the English, not England, not the English Constitution, which means English law. It's the British Empire that's causing the problem, which is Roman Empire. It's the Roman Empire. It's nothing to do with England, apart from the fact that a lot of the older generations got totally and utterly sucked into it, like it was their own thing. So, yeah, that is definitely a tie, but that's not the majority of people that live on England and Scotland, and funny buggers Welsh. The people aren't that, you know what I'm saying? And they certainly didn't benefit from it. They were working in mines and in mills and God knows what else. It's a myth. It's a myth. The elites were rich and wealthy, but people weren't. Just the same as it is in any other country that you may choose. You know, it's all operated like that, hierarchical. You know. Divide and conquer. Yeah, it's total divide and conquer. And they go for it, don't they? So easily. So easily. So I saw something about Nuremberg trials when Himmler, the Goebbels, had been asked how they managed to persuade the German people to become satanic. And he said it's nothing to do with that. It's about knowing human nature. Just like they've done with all this shenanigans. They knew you'd go for it. They knew so many go for it because they don't belong to themselves anymore. Do you think it's the Jesuits or the Zionists that are behind all this? Well, if you follow what I said earlier, it's 458 when they decreed this superiority of blood law, encouraged again after the Crusades through the Templars. And it's always been my suggestion that what the Jesuits are is just the Templar system rebirthing itself back into Rome, because of course the Templars attached themselves to Rome, even though the first 9 knights were French, what we call Jewish aristocrats. They weren't Christian or Catholic families. They were Muranos. But then I don't think they were actually Murano because they didn't hide the Jewishness. So it's not an attack on them. This is just the way it was. So the Jesuits for me are just the same, you know, as was the Templars. Yeah. And the Carthaginians, they were again Phoenicians. So these were the, and Jewry was tapped up with that. So who were these sea people that attacked Egypt? Because when you look into that, there were none of the names that were ever given for these sea peoples, and there were quite a lot when you look at Egyptian records. The Phoenicians were never mentioned. Was it the Phoenicians? I need to read. I can't remember that stuff now, but yeah, nothing adds up too much when you. So like it's like these sea peoples are a bit unknown kind of thing. But it's the same stream that's continuously crept in, and so the final incursion, well, at least it's open now, was the one that comes in the 1700s, which we're not far off reaching now. Yeah, the police are not constabularies anymore. They call themselves a police force, don't they? What's that? They can only operate on contract with you, on person. It's the only way they can contract with you and bust you over is because you contract. Well, we've gone through that in many videos. We don't have to go through that again. But yeah, of course the police are not the police. Are they in uniform? Have they got their hat on? No. That's a constable. Yet they're still using the term. You go past Lancashire headquarters, it's Lancashire Constabulary. And there should be uproar if they ever change that. Because you remember, these are all our assets. This is our estate, parts of our estate. All these buildings, the hospitals. But what's happened is he's created a trust and basically took it away. And then they're laying it out on you. That's what's happened. It's still ours, but we just have to get it back. Well, you know, it's not as simple as that, of course. But I'm talking about as a nation, and take it all out of these trusts and put it back into the nation's hands. So that's all your energy. You know, all these privatized, it should never have happened. You don't privatize your infrastructure. It's ridiculous. It's, as a concept. They call it capitalism. That's not capitalism. That's downright lunacy. And it's not a left policy. It's common fucking sense politics and how to run a country. You don't sell your infrastructure to anything outside the laws of the nation. It's just ludicrous. You know, where were the people in the 80s when this was going on? Where were they? Well, so that's my generation, Generation X. So they were, well, just nonsense. Not silly stuff, silly nonsense, loads of money. That kind of stupid. And young ones, just stupidity. Your reaction to a lot of things were filth, spit, abuse, just nonsense. Anyway, yeah, and then all that happened. Yeah, honestly. So what happened then? All natives sold out all infrastructure as well, petrol stations, shops. Can you see? It's all just, yeah. We've done it ourselves. Is what is reality. You know, we have to keep blaming. We can just point out the forces that encourage, but ultimately, he did it. Service industry stakeholders, yeah. KFC secret recipe. I hope it's not used. Well, what I'm trying to say is, originally when that came over here, because I think one of the first ones to come into this country were up here. I always thought it was Salisbury, but I think it's actually not Salisbury. It were delicious. It were absolutely out of this world. Honestly, it melted in your mouth. But chickens were probably chickens then. You know, not pumped up with whatever crap they pumped up with today. The Holy See. Of course they are, because they were financiers from the get-go, these families that make up the Holy See. Which is what I say, that people say, oh, the Vatican runs the inner city. The Holy See is the beneficiary to the Vatican, to the inner city, to Washington, D.C., to China, to Russia. And I say that because Russia is in league with the priesthood that runs Israel, but yet the people behind this new Roman Empire are the same people that run Israel. Which brings me on to a new kid on the block who's jumping about, giving it the big, large, I am amazing and fantastic, called Dr. David Martin. Okay. Now, I've cocked up because I was supposed to go over this before I started. And when I started to go over it, I realised that the main video I needed, I've lost it. But he's come up with this video, I think it might be on Rumble, giving it the big... So he looks stocky, big fella, more bald head, giving it... shouting at his audience. Now, his main thing is that he's amazing because he's giving you the names of these people. He's had enough and he's showing you blah, blah, blah. So he's giving a lot of truth out there. He's showing the bodies behind the bodies that we've seen, like fires, all these big organisations. We aren't getting into too much detail. But then he's suggesting he's showing you the people. He's giving it you. Now, from what I'm watching, he put it on his screen at the back of him, these pictures and names, but you could not see them watching the video. But while he kept saying how we were giving it out to this audience. Now, he might have done that, I don't know. But it just seemed to me like he were giving... And then he brought up a map of who's to blame in the world for this. And it were everybody and the grandma except two places, Israel and Russia. They were the only two places not being held responsible for all this garbage. Okay, now, yeah, it doesn't take much for you to compute for the nonsense of that when you look at what the Israelis are saying about what's going on in Israel. Okay, so Russia is being used, but yet when you go back to it all, it's the same people using and abusing everybody at the moment. So I can't go into the game with this guy as I wanted to. Suffice to say, you go back to an earlier video, and he's speaking about a blueprint for chance, and he's pushing this new internet avatar system called future dreaming. And honestly, you want to see that. So this guy's bigging himself up as this new super fantastic guy, giving everybody the names. He's just a hero. Put a little bit of a thing into him, and no, I'm sorry, it's not happening now. So I just thought I'd bang that in, and I've completely forgot why I got into that. But we'll go back now so I can have a look at what you're saying, and then we'll go back to this thing. IBM owned most of the revenue officers. Yeah, I mean, IBM now owns and runs what was the Blues and Twos Credit Union, which is the society into which all the assets and liabilities of Lancashire County Council went into. 12 years ago, 13, 14 years, something like that. I've done a lot of work on that. It's up on my website, the Blues and Twos Credit Union, and it's now being run by IBM. Yeah. Lancashire Duchy of Lancashire. You've got to remember that, Lancaster. And when I started mooching about with all this, it was Prince Charles running this duchy on behalf of his mum. But later, when the Duke of Westminster started leaving his post in Cheshire as Deputy Lord Lieutenant and shooting in Outwoods, I got excited about that, and I found out quite a lot. We'll not go into that, but basically, in my opinion, from what I've found, the Grosvenors in America are far wealthier than the Grosvenors here, even though the Grosvenors are seriously wealthy. Have been running the Duchy of Lancaster for quite a time indeed. So anything they carry out here wouldn't surprise me. And so IBM being here centred, and I don't believe my findings when we were investigating the schools leads you to Lancaster University, which is basically an Intel hub surrounded by a university. Keep that in mind too. People were keen to buy their council home for a small percentage of the future value. They were back in the day, and then they've nicked all that. It weren't a bad idea that people bought the council houses, by the way, I thought. Far better than them now being nicked by these associations, which again is another trust taking over what is ours, our assets, as part of our estates. Yeah? Throwing you lot out of your assets for Mr. Refugee. Okay? That's what's happening. It's not racist, not bigoted. That's what's going on. And these people have been brought in as components of the occupation. So they're being paid to do what they're told, where to vote, what to mourn about. And if need be, get out on the streets and start lighting fires and shit. You know what I'm saying? So get a grip to that kind of stuff. Thatcher was a puppet, big time. Her husband were making, do you know what they were up to, them buggers? So MOD was selling all property off, all MOD land and property back in 80s, right? He ran a consortium, property developers. He was also on the board that ran the Falkland Islands port. And before the Falkland Islands War, it cost something like 200 quid to go into Falklands port. After Falklands War, it was something like $2,500 a day. And Thatcher's hubby was on that board. He was also tied to the same Intel network that's now Travis Perkins, which supplies all the builders merchants in this country. British Coal, something to do with the coal, I forgot its name. He was also a part of that. So this guy, Thatcher was selling all the land and MOD land off to her hubby, and they were selling it off at billions. It's no wonder she were on the Privy Council. You digging? This is a girl that used to order urine in because it made her work faster. Son of a, were you a Methodist? A Methodist minister. So he probably taught her that. I don't know why. It's a bit odd. Anyway, there you go. So that's Mrs. Thatcher, as I know. And of course, she incorporated or installed fascism into our domestic infrastructure by privatising our infrastructure. I mean, the American NSA bought BT. And they can have it pretending it's on fronts through France, blah, 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 blah. The American NSA bought British Telecom back in the day. And do you think they give it up? I don't think so. You know? You're digging the scene, man. Thatcher Bilderberg Group, yeah, well, she had no choice. The Bilderberg Group's just part of the round table. It's not, whoa, up there, like Committee of 300. Then you're up there. Yeah, it's still in puppet realm. But these are all way below that. Bilderberg Group is just where, right, let's go back to the Venetians, or the New Venetian Party of the North. Every year between Christmas and New Year, the Queen Elizabeth QE2 ship, our ship, tottles off to Venice, where the black nobility meet on our ship and decide what crack is for a year. Right? Then, through the Bilderberg Group, it's issued to politicians and media. To those parts of all the foundations and all these freaky UN garbage, CFR, RII, Club of Rome, etc. They get it through them networks. Your Ivy Leagues, all these things, that's that network. Okay. All your science that they're all operating on comes out of MIT. Funded, this is the funny bit. Or is it? So, the network that we know as Epstein was way older. Okay? It even goes back to Mayor Lansky times, right? So it was a network that existed, mafia, and it would fund particular projects inside the universities. specifically Harvard and Yale. Okay, I think is Harvard 26 billion endowment. That's its size, Harvard. Is Yale 18 or something like that? I can't remember. 26 billion endowment. That's what. So it's a playground of the super wealthy, isn't it? These two universities. So basically, what happened through MIT and Harvard is the only science being funded was the science as dictated by the Epstein network. That science then gave them the data to create the pseudoscience that we're all operating under today. The blackmail side of that network would then ensure visions of power at times when it needed to be installed, so they were blackmailed into submission. So the origin of what we've got here in the funding side of it, I mean, it's much bigger, but we're talking about the science, comes thanks to Mr. Epstein. So just thought you might want to know that. Interesting stuff. Councils for profit. Yeah, this council here is broke up into 3 shares. Bournefield Construction, which has bought everything up, and bankrupted, more importantly, a lot of local firms in the years it's been taking over this side of Lancashire. Its main operation was bankrupting existing firms by having them put all the scaffold up, let's say, and not paying them. It's been a bugger at Bournefield. I've been on this back for years, but it just doesn't seem to go away. And your councillors, your councillors are on board. And they have 1/3 share in what is called Global Enterprises. The other 1/3 share is a guy called James Stewart Neverson and his wife, who runs AMS Neve, which makes studio equipment, high-level studio equipment, which I had dealings with back in the day. And that time I realised that he was a front for Prince Charles's network or Dutch of Lancaster. So that's, and then of course the 1/3 share of that is the council, you. So all the liabilities of everything that goes on is shoved onto that 1/3 share, you, the taxpayer, the council, and the profits go to the other 2/3 share. And all your councils in the entire country are operating in that manner. That's how it is. You're taking the liability because your council is a 1/3 share in the corporate side of it, and all the money is off into corporate land. Yeah. Look into it yourself, Companies House. You will see what is the corporate company for your council area that they're involved in, and you'll see the shareholders. So, who owns the Chinese companies? China is a complete. They just transplanted what we're here and in America over to China and India. When we were growing up, Generation X, all these derelict mills, that's because they didn't, it's not that they weren't required anymore. They were up sticks and gone. And we paid for it. When they signed into that deindustrialization, we paid for it and still are all and any projected losses that might be incurred when they shifted. Yeah, American taxpayers paid for that. We in Blighty paid for that shift. But you were too busy playing out. You didn't notice. And retiring to Spain, to Dosabet. We've all done it. Sure. Well, the stakeholder committees. Every town's got a stakeholder committee, and it's made of the stakeholders in your area, so the employers. So your police, Asda, Tesco, all these supermarkets. And when they're voting, do you think they're voting to make the town centre thrive? Or do you think they want to shut it down so that you all go to theirs? Who are now down the line wanting to sorry, mate, your name's not there, you're not coming in. Kind of geezers. You know what I'm saying? Aldi have already announced it. By, is it end of March or something? No staff are allowed to be unshotted, and nobody's allowed in if they can't show they've been shotted 800 times. And I think, as a caveat, it said, and if you look like a rabbit, we'll make it easier to get in. So, yeah, anyway. I'm talking at my ass, of course. Chinese companies are operating under the Rothschild system. Yeah, it's just a corporation, and you've got to go through the Bolshevik stuff for that, because while they put up the Iron Curtain, and we could just see the curtain, Soviet Russia behind all that. Oh, where it all going on? Yeah, we'd had wars. We were all pushed down. It were all going on between back end of Russia all the way into China, building it up. Yeah, we deindustrialized and paid for it. We're still paying for it. And then we're getting, oh, never mind that anyway. Made in England used to be a good stamp on stuff, as I remember when I was growing up. Don't do it anymore. Right, shall we get back to the shindig? How long have we been on? Oh, it's not telling me how long we've been on. Oh yeah, an hour. Okay. Right, so we're up to 1600 AD. 1604, Manasseh ben Israel is born. And this guy is the guy from Holland who was financially backing Oliver Cromwell. He's born in 1604. 1609, Pilgrims land in America. They make new compact with the land and declared the Native Americans, the Canaanites, that must be wiped out. So they were nice people. Very nice, Puritan pilgrims, which of course is what Oliver Cromwell represented, wasn't it? So there you go. They demarcated the Native Americans, the Canaanites, after doing a new covenant with God on the land, because it was theirs now, and all the Americans, Native Americans, had to be wiped out. Hip, hip, hooray. So, good grief. 1626, and this is the 9th of Av. Sabatar Teve is born in Smyrna, now Izmir, and that's in Turkey. He was born to Mordechai Zevi, a merchant with close dealings with English merchants. The Jewish Messiah that would introduce the theology of sin for redemption. So now we've got Sabatar Zevi being born. And this is the guy, through his works, how this crazy system would creep in again, but make quite a mess, to be quite frank. It made a hell of a mess, and it affected a lot of people. 1620, Pilgrims land in America. Oh no, we've done that, sorry. 1639, Sabatar Zevi reaches bar mitzvah, so he's 13. In 1640, Manasseh ben Israel named to head yeshiva, enabled by the bankers Perieras, enabling him to focus on writings. Manasseh was most profoundly interested in messianic problems. He was full of Kabbalistic opinions. He entered into correspondence with Christina, Queen of Sweden, ostensibly regarding matters of Hebrew learning, but probably with the design of getting her help in obtaining for the Jews admission into Sweden. But his chief attention was directed to securing the readmission of Jews into England. Antonio di Montezinos, nee Aaron Levi, a 17th century converso who reclaimed his Jewish ancestry after fleeing the Inquisition in Portugal, went to Peru in search of a holy people rumoured to be living among the Amazon Indians. On a remote jungle river near the Ecuadorian border, Montezinos was greeted by a band of light-skinned Indians in dugout canoes. On learning that he was an Israelite from across the seas, the fur-complexioned Aborigines recited the Shema Israel and announced they were descendants of the tribe of Reuben. On his return to Amsterdam, Montezinos shared his discovery with a famous converso rabbi, Manasseh ben Israel, who broadcast the news on his printing press that the biblical prophecy had been fulfilled. He predicted that the scattered tribes of Israel were soon to reunite in Jerusalem to rebuild Solomon's temple and usher in the Messianic age. So that's 1640. All right. Now, so civil war is going down. Charles I getting his head kicked in for moving against enclosure. Okay, both in the landed sense, but also in enclosure in relation to the Admiralty law fixing itself inside English politics, as it were. So 1647, Oliver Cromwell conspires with Manasseh ben Israel's agent to execute English King Charles I. And an entry for June the 6th, 1647 from Oliver Cromwell to Ebenezer Pratt says, and this has been brought into modern language. Now, this was actually put out by the guy who ran the Telegraph in 1922 in the House of Lords, so it's not without fact. In return for financial support, will advocate admission of Jews to England. This, however, impossible while Charles living. Charles cannot be executed without trial, adequate grounds for which at present do not exist. Therefore, advise that Charles be assassinated, but will have nothing to do with procuring an assassin, though willing to help with his escape. So, and as we know, it was when Charles escaped and got caught that pissed everybody off. So, because he ran off. So he wasn't willing to procure an assassin, but he was willing to get him to escape, which would get everybody excited. Ebenezer Pratt's reply was on July the 12th, 1647. So 6 days. Sorry, no, a month after. It says, will grant financial aid as soon as Charles removed and Jews admitted. Assassination too dangerous. Charles should be given the opportunity to escape. His recapture will then make trial and execution possible. The support will be liberal, but useless to discuss terms until trial commences. As I said, this was presented to House of Lords, this stuff, I think it was 1922. And actually, it might not have been Telegraph. Anyway, it was somebody, obviously, that had access to House of Lords, and this information was brought to the House of Lords' attention. He says, another trial was ordered by Cromwell because his agreement with his backers in Amsterdam was that Charles would be executed. The indictment against Charles was drawn up by Isaac Dorislaus, the agent in England of Manasseh ben Israel, one of the main funders from Amsterdam of the Cromwell Revolution. There's that word, revolution. Now, what seems to be interesting here is they were trying to get rid of the Medici monarchy in England because they were installing the Lithuanian Radzils, and they're of the Polish Jagiellonian lines. Yeah, so basically the throne of England was overtaken through Mary de Medici, who married Henry of Navarre. You know what I'm saying? So there were a lot of things, and their daughter was Henrietta Maria, and she married Charles I. Yeah. So in essence, through the wife, you could say Medici had a major. So then he's suggesting that we were better off having the Medicis with Charles than we were having these Lithuanian Radziwills, a Polish Jagiellonian lines. Well, that's totally what you class as Jewry lines, and these you trace them back to the Comnene, Byzantium, on into Armenia back in the days. Interesting, very interesting family when you get into the times when Islam took over Constantinople, Byzantium. Yeah. So in getting rid of Charles, he'd also got rid of Medici line on the throne. And of course, the daughter was William of Orange, married William of Orange. And they did do some good by giving us the Bill of Rights and the Coronation Oath. It was just a shame Anne didn't wise up sooner, if truth be known, because she lost 18 children. Because she won't get rid of Sir Cavendish or Sir Churchill. Right. So yeah, so they got this time they got the Jagiellonians in Sweden and in 1642, sabbatical began. Sabbataya, so that's Sabbataya 7, began the Kabbalistic meditative discipline, climbing Sephirotic ladder, the Lost Messiah. So that's from the book The Lost Messiah. In 1648, Chemelniki massacres thousands of Jews in Europe. 1648, Sabbatai Zeva's messianic mission begins with his first messianic vision, according to Sabbatean tradition. You've got to bear in mind, this guy's vision was that the more sin you do, you're going to bring in the Messiah. So he inverts all ideas of being a good, getting free of this thing, kind of thing, by observing love as a main protocol. So he's the opposite, and it's do sin. So this guy were a paedophile, incest with his daughter, etc. So that's the kind of guy this fellow were. But he had millions of followers. It's quite ridiculous how. So he obviously had backing of this cabal that's crept in. It keeps creeping in. You know what I'm saying? So in 1649, Sabbatai Zev is 23 years old, and then in 1649, Charles is beheaded. So they've achieved a lot in 1649. And the Christian now system, monarchy, has actually been pretty much hammered there, because Charles II was just a puppet. Anyway, of course, there's the idea that Charles wasn't actually beheaded as well, because they do like to feign these things. But let's not complicate things here. So 1649, Cromwell comes to power over England, and he was influenced by Rabbi Manasseh ben Israel of Amsterdam, who functioned as a Jewish ambassador to the Gentiles. Ben Israel was a friend of Rembrandt. 1650, Sabbatai's revelation, the lost Messiah. So he had his revelation in 1650, his main one. 1650, Judah Hachasid, the pious, was born around 1650 in Poland. He was powerfully affected by Sabbatai Zevi. He believed that Sabbatai Zevi was in fact the Messiah. He expected his second appearance in 1706. So he's going to die, and they're expecting him to come back. I think that's the gist of that. In mid-17th century, so that's the 1600s, a new converso colony grew in London, made up partly of refugees from Rouen and the Canary Islands. Interestingly. The Canary Islands are an interesting link here when a case similar to that held against Loyola for sympathy with the Alumbrados took place between the end of the 17th century and the beginning of the 18th century in Tenerife. This concerned Sister Maria Justa de Jesus, a Franciscan nun who was accused of practicing Molinist doctrines, a Christian religious doctrine that attempts to reconcile God's providence with human free will. This nun was famous in her day because she was allegedly able to heal the sick by transferring her person the evils and diseases that afflicted them, so transferring the evils, in a manner similar to shamans in other cultures. The case was investigated by the Holy Inquisition, and according to its files, the nun was accused of being a phony and even a witch. She was also accused of having an improper relationship with her confessor. However, he had many defenders. After her death, the Franciscan order in the Canary Islands initiated a process of canonization that had to be halted owing to the controversy. I don't know why I've added that. Oh, because they were conversos, that's right, sorry. 1651 to 54, Sabbatai thoroughly beaten and driven out of Izmir. So he got his head kicked in basically in Turkey in 1651 to 54, and they were driven out. It was advised that he be killed secretly, but instead was thoroughly beaten and driven out of Izmir. So they didn't like the idea of incest and doing evil to bring in the Messiah in Turkey. Sabbatai thoroughly. 1655, in September, Manasseh ben Israel moved to London. On October 31st, submitted a 7-point petition to the Council of State calling for the return of Jews to England. So that's 1655. So there's a lot going on with this strange cult. Because you've got to remember, we had a lot of Hebrews in this country from the get-go. But it's specifically this other system. 1656, Cromwell's oral guarantee and the approval of the Council of State allowed the conversos of England to practice their faith openly. So these are the ones that are pretended. It's tied into Ignatius Loyola, Illuminati and Templars. And 458 declaration that they are the supreme everything on the earth, and that's sanctioned as a law. race superiority as law, set in 458 BC. In 1657, Manasseh ben Israel dies. So that's the guy that's been shafted in England. But in the same year, Sabbatai Zevi is 31 years old. Now, in 1658, according to Sabbatean tradition, Sabbatai Zevi atones for the sins of Israel. He receives new laws and new commandments to repair the world. So that's that Tikina Alam, I forgot what it's called, thing that they operate to. It's fixing the world, not the earth, the world. So in 1659, he leaves Istanbul and returns to. So he doesn't get kicked out of Turkey. He gets kicked out of Izmir, goes to Istanbul, and then goes back to Izmir. And then he leaves there and goes to Jerusalem. Now back to England in 1664. So Charles I has gone, Cromwell's done his bit, and Charles II is on. A small congregation of Sephardim, so that's not Ashkenazi Jews, was officially recognised by King Charles II after the restoration of the Stuart monarchy. Fulfilment of Manasseh ben Israel's Kabbalistic work laying foundation for the Messiah's coming. So in 1664, Charles II issues a formal written promise of protection, and in 1674 and 1685, further royal declarations were made confirming that statement. So bringing Jews back in after Edward I threw them out is now complete. It's all done. 1690, the Act for Suppressing Blasphemy granted recognition to the legality of practicing Judaism in England. 1665, the 17th of Sivan of Hebrew calendar. Sabbatai Zevi at 39 proclaims himself Messiah in Gaza, announcing that he will proceed to the river Sambation to bring back the lost tribes. Sabbatai Zevi and Nathan the prophet felt an empathy for Jesus, according to Sabbatean belief. The soul of the Messiah had been reincarnated 18 times from Adam onward, including probably Jesus, reported Sabbatai Zevi once claimed. What has Jesus done that you ill-treated him thus? I shall see to it that he will be counted among the prophets. In time, Sabbateans would quietly take the helm of the Vatican. Well, that's when Jacob Frank does his work, so that's after. I'm just reading this that I put together a while ago. 1665, December the 30th, Sabbatai Zevi left Simyamad by ship for Istanbul with a group of his followers. In 1665 still, he was placed under house arrest by the Sultan, locked in chains, and is threatened with poison arrows to prove his divinity. He's given a choice between Islamic conversion or death. So this is this Jewish Messiah whose God-given role is to do sin and sin to bring in the Messianic age, has been arrested by the Sultan and said, well, okay, we'll shoot you with poison arrows to see if you're divine. And then given the choice between conversion or death. And he chooses Islam, right? So you can imagine his millions of followers are a bit pissed off here. Yeah, he's supposed to be divine, the Jewish Messiah, and all of a sudden is converted to Islam. So you can see what kind of a character this fella is. He says he doesn't see he's being a Jew, but becomes a Muslim also. I'm pretty much sure that's not what the Sultan had in mind, so I think they've added that bit there to make him look a bit better. I'm not saying that because he converted to Islam, that's why he's a bum, but I'm just saying if he's this Messiah, you wouldn't do that, would you? It doesn't matter which religion you wear, it's a bit tapped. So you can obviously see, not only is he a complete idiot because he believes in the worse sin you do, the better, he's also a bit of a change agent, it would appear. Sabbatai is above the categorization of Jew or Muslim, they say. Much to the shock and chagrin of the Jewish world, Sabbatai appeases the Sultan. He then begins to lay the groundwork restructuring of the world based on universalism and the world brotherhood, ruled by an elite of his devoted followers dedicated to eradicating the world's ills and promoting progress of civilization. Oh, I've seen that before, like everywhere, all over at shop. If you look outside of, if you look into TV land. And of course now he's a Muslim. So this guy's, and his insanity, he's now slap bang inside the Sultan's cave. 1665, saboteur given post in Sultan's palace until 1673. So this guy's not become just numpty, he's still up there with the geezer. And then he's exiled to Albania in 1673. Albania's an interesting place. 1674, the Treaty of Westminster, so that's back here. New York and Jersey given back to England after Third Dutch War. So, right. So the 1674 Treaty of Westminster, New York and Jersey is given back to English after Third Dutch War. The Templars take full control of the city as the Templar Navy and financial arms combine in the sovereign state that is the inner city of London. So that's 1674. 1676, sabotage every dies. And then something called the Donme is formed. And this is back in Turkey. So his game continues through this. Who, bearing in mind now, it's now an Islamic cult. 1690, German Jewish immigrants to England start a synagogue. The first Ashkenazi community was formed in London, and soon Ashkenazi established congregations all over England. By 1690, there were about 400 Jews in England. There were a lot more than that. 1697, Judah the Pious started off with 31 families of scholars to await the messianic revelation of a resurrected Sabbatai Sevi. Okay, so it's death worship, the resurrecting dead people. Yeah, so it's necromancy. The thesis is do sin, have sex with your child, etc., etc. So now we're up to 1700. So now we're also, if we remember back, the Prussians have created the Confederacy in 1400, and this century, the 1700s, this Prussian Confederacy pushes itself all over shop. Big swathes of Germany, puts its own on the throne of England in the Hanoverians, annihilates all the Baltic states, including Khazaria, right down to the Black Sea. And this is Catherine the Great, who is a Prussian, Anhalt, kills her husband, who was the last, get this, the last Romanov. And this is 1762. So the last Romanov died in 1762 at the order of Catherine the Great, who was of Russia. And she basically expanded the Russian landmass on behalf of the Prussians. So that's into Kazakhstan, all these big areas that go right on up into what's Tartaria, all these areas that they're now forming this new history about. So yeah, that's all interesting. So we're at 1700. I'll have a look at where you lot are. Are you bored yet? 123. We're not too bad. James de Rothschild and Alexander de Rothschild control Vanguard. Or do they? I'm going to just... That's interesting. But not surprising. Let's be fair. As I've said, it's, to me, they are the sort of the court financiers or Templars, as the other guy said. So they are operating in them, but it's not theirs, is it? They're just operating for another. Yeah, Ray. It's a font of wisdom, is that Ray? Oh, you're not going to chew my goal on your own, you lot. That's fair enough. Evelyn. It's Evelyn that was giving the finger to Charles. And it's one of my early videos. You can't... You don't need any... He doesn't need any description. It's there for you to see. There is the mechanic going on. And as is Charles, it's the same with Tudor and his son. Or is it? that doesn't really matter when it comes to puppeteering, does it? Okay, so we'll go back to this. So somebody called Judah the Pious arrives in Jerusalem and dies, said to be murdered. 1700, William of Orange is knighted the first Jew, and Sephardic, not Ashkenazi. A guy called Solomon de Medina, and that was on June the 23rd, 1700. 1701, a Sephardic synagogue at Bevis Marks was opened. 1705, a Hebrew printing press started in London. 1706, Judah he Chassid, the pious, believed to be the dead Sabbatai Zevi, was in fact the Messiah. He expected his second appearance in 1706. So all of a sudden, Judah he Chassid has been said to be Sabbatai Zevi, resurrected, and the Messiah is back. 1707, Rabbi Mosheim Luzzatto was born, and Luzzatto admitted to being influenced by the writings of Nathan of Gaza, and that's Sabbatai Zevi's prophet. Okay, so that's another rabbi. He claimed that the positive elements of Sabbatai Zevi's teachings could be separated from the heretical elements. But few rabbinic authorities agreed with this opinion, since Sabbataianism was a powerful way of sweeping over the Jewish community. A bitter controversy ensued concerning the verity and propriety of Luzzatto's activities and claims. Luzzatto's house was searched, and evidence that he engaged in magical practices was found. He was compelled to cease and desist from teaching Kabbalah. So you can see there that the existing Jewish communities were being attacked by this thing that was sweeping over everything, and it was absurd. Absurd, the whole thesis of it was complete nonsense. 1716, Barachia Rousseau claimed to be the Messiah, the reincarnation, they're all at it now, and an incarnation of God. 1716, the first known Jewish Mason, dating from 1716, 1 year before the creation of the first Grand Lodge, was an English Sephardi, Francis Francia, also known as the Jacobite Jew. He was tried and later exonerated from an accusation of high treason in an English newspaper of 1877. Recounting this incident, Francia is called a Mason. So that's 1716, yeah, and he was a Jew, and he was classed as a Mason in the newspaper. 1717, Freemasonry publicly founded in England upon the 7 laws of Noah, as mentioned in the Talmud, in the rebuilding of Solomon's Temple. Solomon's Temple, Templars, yeah, we're back, same stream again. And there we go. Publicly founded upon the 7 laws of Noah. So Freemasonry, from this aristocratic birthing, has been about nothing other than removing Christendom off the gospel and putting it under 7 laws of Noah. Right? Can you see now where if you've followed these videos for quite a while, it all interconnects in a way that you cannot ignore, and if you're not having it, you need to do a bit more study, because I'll say to you, you will find more you see that it supports this. So we can see this system, it's done its shift into Islam. Yeah. Back it comes into the Jewish thing again through the next bunch, or the Domne as we're formed. Now then, 1726, this is where it takes its shift and shifts into Catholicism. 1726, Jacob Frank born in Brzezing or Karowalka, Galicia, Poland, now in Ukraine. Now Poland, parts of Poland is where the Prussians have origin also. We have to remember that. We've just sent some troops over there, remember. Not that I have anything against the Poles, I haven't. The Poles I know are lovely people. But the Israeli, where was it? No. One of the Israeli presidents on a video that I have actually got, bragging that they bought Poland. They bought it. And that were in the 90s. So, yeah, anyway. So there is, we have to keep his eyes on that stuff. So Jacob Frank's born in 1726. And in the same vein as Sabbatai Zevi, this is the guy that's going to enter the Catholic Church and spread this vile puke, which will then be the source of the paedophilia in the Catholic Church. Yeah? Do you get what I'm saying? So it lets everybody off the hook if you can start to recognise that the foolishness is to still back these organisations now that they've been took over. You know, you are who you are, your connection with the universe. You don't need that. You just need to get out of the shit and pull together on the outside, everybody. Like the anti-shotters are everywhere. You've brought Italy to a standstill now for quite a few days. Millions of Italians saying, I don't think so. You know, and he's just not getting it on the TV. So, I'm just going to make a cigarette. Apologies again if it offends, but I don't want to start rushing, because if I start rushing, 1730, Masonic lodges promoting universal brotherhood began springing up in continental Europe. At the time, a new type of Jew was emerging, one who had acquired some Western education and had adjusted his behaviour to conform to the standards accepted among Gentiles, to the extent that he now could aspire to full membership in their society. This new Jew first made his appearance among the Sephardim of England, Holland and France, and afterward among the Ashkenazim of all Western countries. After the 1780s, he became a permanent feature of European social life, as becomes evident from the number of Jews who kept knocking at the doors of the Masonic lodges. So in 1730, it was the main people that were encouraging into these new lodges, this occult Freemasonry, pushing 7 laws of Noah, was attracting mainly the Jews. 1732, another Jew, Edward Rose, was initiated in a lodge presided by Daniel Delvale, eminent Jew snuff merchant, as characterised in a report in the Daily Post of 22nd September 1732. Without doubt, Delvale must have preceded Rose by several years to have reached the high position of master of the lodge. Furthermore, Brother Matthias Levy, an article entitled Jews as Freemasons, published in the Jewish Chronicle in 1898, claims that the initiation book took place in the presence of Jews and non-Jews. Sorry, the initiation took place. These other Jews present must have been Masons themselves, initiated at an earlier date. Okay, so that's suggesting again that we can look at this new Freemasonic occult thing is this incursion, and its basis is sabotage the inversion of everything we Gentiles all dear. Well, I'd rather all the morals of a Gentile any day than this shite. You know what I'm saying? And as I'm showing, it's not. We haven't to afford it to all Jews. You haven't to afford it to all Muslims. You haven't to. It's not. But if you pick up on it and you're a Jew and a Muslim, then you're a complete sado. You know, you've moved into arsewipe position. You know, you're no longer groovy. 1734. 6,000 Jews live in England. The Jewish upper class still consisted of brokers and foreign traders, but Jews gradually entered all areas of life. The first Jews were Sephardim. So it wasn't the Ashkenazi. So the Sephardim, when you look at things like this, you can see that the Sephardim are actually in control of the Ashkenazi. Made much easier later when Catherine the Great pretty much takes it all over. And then quite easy to fill the pogroms, would it not be, if you've completely enslaved the Khazarian nation and all the other nations on the steppes. 1744. Mayer Amschel Rothschild is born. Mayer Amschel Bauer. Okay, now Bauer is one of the ancient Roman Jewish lines going way back into the Empire days. Okay, so anyway, on February the 23rd, 1744, in Frankfurt am Main, Germany, he was the founder of the Rothschild family banking empire that would become one of the most successful business families in history. He changed his name to Rothschild, or Red Shield in English, so he's shielding the red. Shielding the red from Bauer. So they shifted from Bauer to Red Shield. The previous family name, in reference to the Red Shield, was that it was the official house sign and thus logo type of the family business. A bank and a brothel founded by his father Moses. Mayor Amschel's famous quote is, "Give me control of a nation's money and I care not who makes your laws." And that's obviously the Rothschilds. And there's an interesting video on this page, actually, just under that section. 1751, Jacob Frank proclaimed himself Messiah. Right? So you remember, this guy, Jacob Frank, still under exactly the new heretic of Shabbatai Zevi. So let's do sin, let's paedophilia, and have sex with our children. In 1752, which is after he's proclaimed himself Messiah, he gets married. 1753, the Jewish Nationalization Bill, and it was called the Jew Bill, was issued to give foreign-born Jews the ability to acquire the privileges of native Jews, but was rescinded due to anti-Jewish agitation. And that's going on in England. So people weren't happy. I mean, that was the role of the Cockneys in London. They kept the Jews in the Jewish quarter. Cleverly, the Jews then encouraged all the Cockneys out into Essex, and now we have a city that has very few natives in it. Let's be frank about it, that's reality. 1755, Jacob Frank in Poland formed a sect that held that certain elect persons were exempt from the moral law. This sect abandoned Judaism for a higher Torah Jewish law based on the Zohar, which was the most important work in the Kabbalah. The Jewish mystical movement, so that's the Jewish mystical, so this is sabotaged every year. This is where it's coming from, and it's been inverted, remember. The whole tree, everything that you're using, if you're using the mystical arts, you're on the inverse, not just that back left to right, but up, down. Is it any wonder what you're trying to mean happen isn't happening? Hence, its members are also they call themselves Zoharists. Their practices, including orgiastic or sexually promiscuous rites. Joseph II, Emperor of Austria, beds with Frank's daughter, Eva, during a rite. Antleman. So you can see they're pulling in these the European aristocratics, and it's sex. It's all sex, isn't it? It sells. Sex sells. I mean, look at porn. It's probably bigger than oil in its revenue. 1756, the Jewish community banned Jacob Frank and his group as heretics. So you can see again, the Jews are saying, "Piss off! Who the hell are you? You're crazy." Yet, what we class as Judaism today is this sex stuff. You know, it's what it is. It's where it comes from, and its origin 458 BC. 1756, an anthology of Masonic prayers appeared in print. Among them, one to be recited at the opening of the lodge meeting and the like for the use of Jewish Freemasons in Jewish lodges. Okay, so the anthology of Masonic prayers, it was in print in 1756. 1759, September the 17th, Jacob Frank converts to Christianity. Right, so Jews have kicked him out. He's a Kabbalist, mystical sin doer, and he's now converted to Christianity. I mean, who accepted these conversions? Clearly, already people in for God's sake, you know what I'm saying? 1760, February the 6th, Jacob Frank arrested in Warsaw on the charge of feigned conversion to Catholicism and the spreading of pernicious heresy. Pernicious heresy. He was convicted as a teacher of heresy and imprisoned in the monastery in the fortress of Czestochowa so that he might not communicate with his adherents. So this guy's got big followers. 1760, Baal Shem Tov dies. 1769, Napoleon born on August the 15th. Interesting. Corsica. That's where all Jesuits are about to all go when they get kicked out of Vatican and the rest off into Russia, or invited by Catherine the Great. And Napoleon's wife, Carolingian. Josephine, she was a Carolingian. So this is Charlemagne, the numpties. Now, 1770, Jacob Frank made a pact with Adam Weishaupt. Are you seeing? a Jewish-born Jesuit to enlist his Sabbatines to join Wise Up's Illuminati. So this is your Bavarian Illuminati. Yeah? Not the first. Yeah? Alumbrados, Jesuits. Here it comes again. Because the Jesuits are out, remember. You know what I mean? They're on their way out. So something new has to be created in the Roman system. And I've put as a note, the Illuminati order was not invented by Adam Weishaupt, but rather renewed and reformed. The first known Illuminati was Alumbrado, which we've done that, haven't we? In 1491, San Ignatius de Loyola was born in the Basque province of Guipuscoa, Spain. It's not Aki. His parents were Marranos, and at the time of his birth, the family was very wealthy. As a young man, he became a member of the Illuminati Order of Spain as a covert for his crypto-Jewish activities. He became very active as a Roman Catholic. In 1539, he moved to Rome, where he founded the Jesuit order. That's cited. The company. That's what they call themselves, the company. East India Company. Dutch East India. They're tied to Protestantism, but only because Rome has the inner city. It's still the company, still the Templar. Yeah. And they spread through the big education systems in England everywhere. At this time when they're being kicked out of Vatican system. 1772, August, Frank released by conquering Russians who had occupied. So there you go. Yeah. Frank's released by conquering Russians. So this is your Catherine the Great. Okay, she's banging in there. So he's now released. 1772 to 86, Frank moves to the Moravian town of Brno, so that's Germany, and lives there for 13 years. Frank spoke a great deal about a general revolution which would overthrow kingdoms and the Catholic Church in particular. He weren't a very good converter, although were he? Kicking his ass now. 1776, Freemasonry's American Revolution. So, they've got this clothes stuck into Blighty, and then you can see where they've got their clothes stuck into Colony. Yeah? 1780, the Order of the Asiatic Brethren in Europe, founded in Bruin, Moravia, by Jacob Frank, who changed his name to Dobrushka to construct an upper level above the regular Masonic structure, which opened doors to additional mysteries. The Order's theosophic doctrines, did you hear that word? And ceremonial regulations were based upon Jacob Frank's militaristic version of Sabbatean Kabbalah. And that comes from Katz, page 27. 1784, Sir Moses Chaim Montefiore, a Sephardic Mason, was born in Livorno, Italy. Montefiore, you heard that name, powerful family. And he's born in Livorno, Italy. 1786, Jacob Frank suffers temporary financial problems and moved his court to Offenbach, near Frankfurt. There, Frank's money problems were solved by benefactors, among them M.A. Rothschild. So you can see now Rothschild's tie to Sabbatean Judaism, yeah? Not Hebrewism. 1789, French Masonic Revolution. So in they go there, they've annihilated France now, yeah? 1791, Frank dies in Offenbach. 1791, Masonic Napoleon emancipates French Jewry. 100 years later, another French Mason, Baron Edmond de Rothschild, would support the establishment of Israel. So Napoleon emancipated him. Napoleon also put the Knights of Malta subservient to the Jesuits under threat. Force. Can you see what's happened here? Yeah? Rome has been totally took over, and the backdrop for the paedophile stuff clearly comes from Jacob Frank's moves and dealings inside the church, the Catholic Church. Now, 1794, the Duke of Brunswick, the Grand Master of German Freemasonry, wrote a letter to his brethren recommending the dissolution of the entire organisation due to the fact that it had been infiltrated and was being manipulated by unseen hands. Other such warnings would commence in the years after the Duke as governments took the revelations seriously. In the United States, this was carried out by John Robinson. So in 1794, it was realised that this twisted sisterhood had got stuck into this, and there were calls for Freemasonry to be disbanded. And it was taken seriously. And in America, it was taken very seriously as well. 1796, Napoleon's Italian campaign. 1799, Masonic brother Napoleon becomes first consul of the French Republic. 1794, that should be. Ooh. Napoleon becomes emperor of the French. So there you go. You can see it's all been the Christian monarchies that Napoleon were annihilating, and they were scooping them up into this twisted system. So you know what I'm saying? It's not that by definition of the origins or the three Abrahamic religions, as they've been shown to be, they are expressing that now, but that's not what they were. And that being the case, any man out there, you can no longer carry on supporting, because that's what's dragging you into something that's really ridiculous, the doing of sin. You know? Well, basically, if you knock everybody off, this no-hide system can show itself in without any interference, can you? Especially if you won't knock yourself off. So let's just have a look at where you lot are at and how long have we done here? 1-4, all right. So Evelyn's in charge of you. Well, he's certainly in charge of Prince Charles, that's a fact. We're out of shadow. You just look at that, you just look at it and you can see. You don't need to say a word. A picture speaks 1,000 words, as they say. And that one surely does. I think it's in the earlier videos last year, and it's got the Parachute Regiment logo on it. I think that's where I show that. It is actually where I show it. Because, of course, I'm speaking to the Red Machine. They need to know this. Because they're going to be asked to come onto our streets, I'm pretty sure. And I want to know I can trust the Red Machine to protect England, not this bunch of Johnny-come-latelys that we're revealing here. Yeah, resets all the time. They have to do to put this fake thing, this mimic Lockie's system over Odin's, the All Father. I saw something the other day where they were arguing about All Father. Somebody said, we're a Jewish input. Well, sorry, All Father, Norse. Okay? Way before all this shenanigans. All Father. That's where it comes from, not some Jewish input. Jewish input could well be the term God. Because that can mean anything. Are you telling a fib if you say, oh, my God told me? You're not, are you? Because it could be anything. It's a misnomer, if you get what I'm saying. Well, I don't want to be bigging up what's going on the Polish border, I can assure you. Just don't forget. Look, the idea that Germany invaded Poland, that kicked off the First World War and got our idiot Churchill to declare war on Germany, that was garbage. I have a piece on the website, I think it's 6 Million Jews, it's called, the title, where it shows New York newspaper reports showing that it wasn't the Germans doing anything in Poland. The Poles kept attacking the Germans. That's what were happening until they'd had enough. And then our idiot got us sucked into it. So we do have to watch Poland, especially given the brag in the 90s that they bought it up, the political class of Israel. Pretty sure. Shimon, I think. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I don't want to be giving it to the wrong person. Well, if you say the Sabbatine Frankists, what they're doing, they're dealing with all the passions, the extremities of the passions. So if you're governed by those, your genetic program, you're going to be totally attracted to that kind of stuff, aren't you? Because it's part of human nature. So if you go for it, it's on you, isn't it? Just because it exists doesn't mean you have to do it. Well, it's a cult because it's hidden from you. That's all. It's not a cult when you know it, is it? So when he says it's out there, he's correct. It's hidden to you because you don't know about it. Right, back to the jig. So in 1806, get this, Napoleon's Jewish Sanhedrin convenes. So this guy's put himself up as the head of the Sanhedrin in 1806. Interesting, isn't it, then, that the fact that Wellington won was down, basically, to the Rothschilds. So you can see it's just a game. All these wars are just games, and you're the fodder. You're the actors that make it happen. It's not on the screen anymore because it comes off the screen and you'll act it. Anyway, 1806, the Holy Roman Empire falls under Napoleon. Napoleon's Mason, possibly of Spanish Marano origins. Napoleon Mason. I'm not sure what I mean. 1807, the Frankfurt Juden Lodge, founded by Emir Rothschild, clerk Gessenheimer. The old established Frankfurt families were well represented in the lodge, including the Adlers, Speyers, Riesis, the Seychelles. Even the richest and most powerful Frankfurt families were included. The Ellisons, Hanos, Goldsmiths, the Rothschilds, Solomon Mayer, who afterwards moved to Vienna. The second of the 5 Rothschilds brothers became a member. So that's the Frankfurt Juden Lodge. So what I'm seeing, but I have more work to do, is that this Prussian Confederation is this system in its entirety. Because it's just everything offshoots from this stream, as it were. 1812, Miriam Rothschild dies and Napoleon's defeat at Battle of Waterloo, and in Rothschild's victory at the London Bourse. So he basically just annihilated the stock exchange out of your hands and into his hands. Excellent. I know you probably all know that. Now, 1816, Eva Frank dies. So that's Jacob Frank's wife. That must have significance. 1829, Jews began arguing in England for official equality. 1830, Pope Pius XIII, the Medici Pope, changed the rules on usury for the Vatican, and this caused real anger from the Protestant branch of Christendom. Can you see that? So the Pope changes the rules on usury and it pisses the Protestants off. Can you see? So they were still holding to Christendom with the Protestants in these times. Because it's after Napoleon's victory that this place really twists up and changes. And Methodism was a major program in that respect. It turned everybody into working hard in the mills for Jesus. Pretty successful as well, so following the money lines, we find Medici's bankers morphed into Fugger and onto Rothschild. So that's correct. Yeah, I think when I trace back the Rothschilds a bit, the Fugger bank seemed to be in play before. So yeah, and I must have suggested Medici before that. So Medici, Fugger, Rothschild. 1831, with the death of George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, the bankers opened the new paradigm of materialism into the new Germany. So 1831, materialism's thrown into Germany. That's interesting because if you look at all of the German castles, they're like fairy tale castles, aren't they? You know, like Disney early days. So definitely a change there. As opposed to Gothic. Do you know what I'm saying? It weren't Gothic in Germany until 1832, the House Rothschild began to finance the Church of Rome. Came over, didn't it, really? 1833, the first Emancipation Bill passed the House of Commons, but was defeated in the House of Lords in 1833. Jewry was admitted to the bar. So in 1833, it was blocked. They didn't emancipate them for equality. And that's your lords, which of course had a lot of Christians. There were Christian lords in there. This is why they've gone out for leather to get rid of the lords, and through Blur put their own men in. And they've done that successfully. To get rid of the Christian, Protestant aristocracy. And you've all paid for it. You know, I couldn't believe everybody were baying for the destruction of their own second house. It was quite ridiculous. Such is life. 1835. Oh, but in 1803, the jury was admitted to the bar. Right? So that's another important date. 1835. First Jewish sheriff was appointed. See? The mimics took over. Moving over. 1840, Lord Shaftesbury presents a paper to British Foreign Minister Lord Palmerston, calling for the recall of the Jews to their ancient land. This came as Palmerston expanded the opium into China. So 1840 is the ominous beginnings of homeland. Lord Shaftesbury to Lord Palmerston. Okay. 1841. George Scholar, previously the governor of South Australia, starts to encourage Jewish settlements in the land of Israel. So Australia's playing a game in this game, 1841. And of course, if we go back to Frater 616, he did claim and does claim in his memoirs that Israel's actually governed from Sydney in Australia, because Australia is a perfected satanic state. And those are his words, not mine. 1841, Isaac Leon Goldsmith was made baronet, the first Jew to receive a hereditary title. In 1841, the first Anglo-Jewish periodical, the Jewish Chronicle, was founded. It still exists today. Now, there's a video under that, but that's been removed. I don't know what it was. 1843, here we go. Cyrus Ignason Schofield is born, and he's the pupil of John Nelson Darby and responsible for the Schofield Reference Bible that would undermine Protestant Christianity and have it dance with the Zionists. Yeah, so there again, now you can see it's just all this crept in. It crept in, and it's crept into all of us. 1846, in Britain, the Corn Laws were repealed, opening the platform for free trade. Free trade is the Masonic mechanic to undermine real trade between men and to shift everything into commerce, which of course the bankers control. It acts as a parasitic role to add charges and fees to what is a simple exchange between two parties. From these fees and charges have they built the legal machine. So the legal machine in its entirety is born of commerce, admiralty law. And 1846, that's when the Corn Laws were repealed. That's when all this crap came in there, 1846. 1849, said to be the father of Joseph Stalin, Maurice Euphrasie was born. Now, this guy's a Rothschild, might I remember. He was a Ukrainian-born French-Jewish banker. His father had made a vast fortune exporting the wheat of the Ukraine to Europe. Baron Alphonse James de Rothschild had an agent whom he favoured above all the rest. His name was Maurice Euphrasie, and he represented the French Rothschilds and the oil-rich Caucasus. There you go, Joseph Stalin's father. Okay. The Euphrasies were the Rothschild agent to the Tsar. It was Maurice Euphrasie who first proposed the Russian oil business to Alfonso de Rothschild. Euphrasie thoroughly understood the Russian oil industry. He just knew that with the Nobel brothers' dynamite, so that's the house Nobel, blasting through the Caucasus Mountains, Rothschild financed railroads could carry Russia's oil to the world if Russia could get their hands on a suitable port on the Black Sea. And so I have a study there for you to look. There's a lot of links in this chronology as well. 1843, Kabbalistic Masonry Lodge commissioned in New York, connected to the Scottish Rite Freemasonry called B'nai B'rith, as the run-up to the American Civil War, which installed key players into the Confederate side of the coming war, Albert Pike being a prime example. The ADL would form the script called Anti-Semitic to cover all moves by this Talmudic Rothschild network as it installed itself into American Freemasonry to support the unfettered rights of Israel. Excuse me. And this is 1843. So the plan went way before Balfour Declaration. 1855, the first Jewish Lord Mayor of London, Sir David Solomons, took office. In 1855, Jews College, a theological seminary, was started. It's now an affiliate of London University that offers rabbinical training and adult education. 1858, the emancipation of the Jews and a change in the Christian oath required of all members of Parliament. Right, 1858. So here you can see the emancipation of the Jews. But not only do they want emancipation, they want to change everything, especially if it's Christian. So the emancipation of the Jews and a change of the Christian oath required all members of Parliament. On July 26, 1858, the Jewish Baron Lionel de Rothschild took his seat in the House of Commons after an 11-year debate over whether he could take the required oath. So they changed the oath so this guy could get in. Doesn't that show you where the power is? Not us. A Jewish welfare organisation for the poor called the Jewish Board of Guardians, not the Jewish Welfare Board, was created in 1859. Okay, so that's to look after the pogroms here. 1860, Theodore Herzl, visionary of the state, 2nd of May 1860, was an Austro-Hungarian journalist, playwright, political activist, and writer who was the father of modern political Zionism. Herzl formed the Zionist organization and prompted Jewish immigration to Palestine in an effort to form a Jewish state. Though he died before its establishment, he is known as the father of the state of Israel. 1863, Rothschild and Isaac Goldsmith of the Ashkenazi community joined Sir Moses Montefiore of the Sephardim to solidify the Board of Deputies of British Jews. Rabbi Nathan Marcus Adler united all. Okay. 1855, the Ashkenazi congregations near London formed into a united synagogue and created the Chief Rabbinate of England, 1855. Now, in a bit, we're going to have a massive influx of Jewish pogrom Jews, and it causes a lot of trouble. I don't know whether I've covered it here. 1874, Benjamin Disraeli became the first Jewish Prime Minister of Britain. A confused man who had been baptized a Christian but was open about his Judaic inheritance, once needling a Commons opponent with the jibe that when the ancestors of the right honourable gentleman were brutal savages in an unknown island, mine were priests in the Temple of Solomon. And that's Benjamin Disraeli. Finally, by 1890, all restrictions for every position in the British Empire, except that of monarch, were removed to Jews, some 46,000 of whom now lived in England. That claim about the monarch is not correct because Queen Victoria was saved by a Rothschild, as were all but one of her illegitimate children that just happened to become the entire monarchy of late 19th and the entire 20th century Europe. His most lasting achievement was the creation of the modern Conservative Party, which until that time had been a Catholic movement. That is correct, because they were actually known back there that the word Tory is actually Irish for Catholic bandits. So the Conservative Party, or the people with the Conservative outlook, were actually Catholics. When it became the Conservative Party, it had been shifted by Disraeli on behalf of the Jews. So the Conservative Party isn't the Tory Party. So they're definitely not Tories, what we see today, or are they not? They're Bolsheviks. The Tory Party today is Bolshevism. And it became a nest of jury, saying the Conservative Party. That bores out when I've studied the history of the Conservative Party that we would recognise. 1880, the pogroms of Germany, Russia and Poland began to empty themselves of the Ashkenazi Jews, many of whom came to England usurping all the good relations had between Sephardic Jewry and Protestant Christianity. Because they'd been marrying each other. So many of the Jewish females were marrying the Protestant males. Yeah, we were getting on. They were doing what the Bible commanded and assimilated. This other section constantly is there to make sure they never do. So they have to invent why they have to shit themselves and that everybody in the world hates them. No, people in general dislike certain behaviours. And it doesn't matter what label that you're giving yourself. If you're expressing a certain behaviour, you're going to be disliked. So it upset the fact that the Jewish communities in England were actually marrying the Protestant English lads, and vice versa. I think that happened in my family further back as well. 1880, the pogroms of Germany, Russia, oh, done that, but in 1915, this mass immigration was stopped by an act of parliament. It was. So from 1880 to 1915, 35 years, pogroms emptying. It also happened in America as well at the same time. Now you've got to bear in mind that from 1914 to 1918, our men were annihilated. Right? In 1915, the mass immigration was stopped by an act of parliament. With all the men of Britain slaughtered, who became Freemasonry during the First World War. This was overseen by Sephardic commander Moses Montefiore. In order they can create Yiddish front for the real heads of the Talmud, the Sephardic Jews. Today, this position appears to have reversed, but it only appears, does it not? You see, these ruling bloodlines could very well be Sephardic, which is the real Jews from the Holy Land. The Ashkenazi, of course, being from the steppes of Russia. But, you know, let's be frank about this. Religion does not determine race. Religion is something you believe in, something you take on. A race is something you're born into. You can't help it. It's your genetics. So there's a serious, you know, deception going on around all that as well. Right, 1881, Mustafa Kemal the Jew, later known as Ataturk, was born in Thessalonica, now in Greece. 1882, 46,000 Jews lived in England. 1885, Sir Moses Montefiore dies. 1888, Adolf Hitler was conceived in Vienna during a Frankish celebration of the 9th of Av, which took place on the 20th. 1888, in celebration of Sabbatai Zevi's birthday. Adolf Hitler was born 9 months later on April the 20th, in 1889. Hitler would force European Jewry into Israel because when they announced the creation of the State of Israel, European Jews refused to move. And we did see this recently when Israel told all the Yemeni Jews to leave Yemen before the Saudis attacked. And they refused. Because they've done what the Bible said and that's their home. It's where they live. 1897, Theodor Herzl, at considerable personal expense, founded the Zionist newspaper Die Welt in Vienna, Austria-Hungary, and planned the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. He was elected president of the Congress, a position he held until his death in 1904, and in 1898 he began a series of diplomatic initiatives to build support for a Jewish country. He was received by William II on several occasions, one of them in Jerusalem, and attended the Hague Peace Conference, enjoying a warm reception from many statesmen. Right, 1900. Okay, so we're up to 1900. 1901, American President William McKinley is assassinated. Okay, now anybody knows about him, you'll know why he was assassinated and why I've included it in there. Because we're getting up to the time now where they want to get the Federal Reserve in. And you've got Guggenheim, you've got Astor, and the other one. All three of them, the wealthiest men in America, equally against the formation of the Federal Reserve. And it would appear they also were against the First World War. And so they had the means to prevent it. Up came the Titanic, and they got rid of them three on there. So the story goes. 1903. So McKinley is assassinated. 1903, the Bolshevik Party is established in Russia. 1903, Britain proposes the Jews establish a British protectorate in Kenya. Herzl proposed a settlement in the Sinai Peninsula. Egypt, Lord Cromer counter-proposed with Kenya. This was rejected by the Zionists, as unlike the Egyptian suggestion, which was one part of King David Israel, Kenya, as the Jews had no ancestral claim to Kenya. So that's why he wanted Egypt instead of Kenya. Anyway, but the Kenya was offered up by the man, what were he called? Lloyd Cromer. 1904. Now, this is very interesting and it needs to be taken on board. 1904, Theodor Herzl went to visit Pope Pius X to ask for his blessing for those who exalted the Talmud above all doctrine could invade and take over the land of Palestine. All right. So the Uber Zionist is asking the Pope, Pius X, if they'll bless this takeover of Palestine. The Pope explained that though the Church had no issue with Zionist business visiting Palestine, the Church would not support by any means an invasion and takeover of lands in the Middle East. So it's not the Roman Church behind all this. The Holy Roman Empire, yes, but not the Church. It's there to be seen if you would look and get out of the frantic stuff that's generally generated when it's religion involved. So Pope Pius X, a good egg. Now I looked into him after I'd learnt this, and he were a good egg. This guy were what you'd expect a Pope to be. Yeah. So the Vatican by 1904 was still in the hands of something good, you know. 1904, Russian-Japanese War was created. Now, get what? Where were all the navy supplied to Japan built? By the House of Rothschild, the docks up in Newcastle, because they owned it, all of it. 1906, many meetings were held over the invention of wireless and other electronic technologies on how it would be used against the public while remaining a monopoly. 1909, the first Scofield Bible released into the heart of Protestant Britain to ensure the Rothschild fancy got its Christian support. Because they didn't get it off the Pope in 1904, Jews being so few couldn't get this off the ground without the support of Christianity. It was impossible. The Pope said no, 1904, so they had to attack it, throw it on the Protestants. Can you see the pattern, how it worked? So the first Scofield Bible was released to Protestant Britain to ensure the Rothschild fancy got its Christian support. In so doing, the British aristocracy left Christendom and joined Jewry without the consent of the public. So it was the British aristocracy that took it on. The vicars said no way. They weren't having it at all. Okay, the vicars and the lords, they weren't having it. But the aristocratic landed gentry were up for it. 1911, May 15, Supreme Court ordered the dissolution of Standard Oil Company, ruling it was in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. As a monopoly in oil, it became too big and was broken up into 7 sisters to expand its global reach. So it didn't do it any harm. It just, a bit like John Lang when they were going to privatise or nationalise construction, he divided his company up into northwest, southwest, blah blah blah. That's Knights of Malta, by the way, John Lang, as it were. I like working there. It were good, but yeah, that was where I got approached for the first time by the Knights of Malta. But I was too thick then. I didn't know. He asked from my elbow. I had no idea, really. I didn't know they were on about. Right, yeah. 1913, Rothschild Syndicate set up the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, and Jacob Schiff burst the Anti-Defamation League to keep the politicians from speaking about it and the media from reporting about the facts, which the term anti-Semitic became born then. That to prevent anybody from exposing this shitty system. Yeah, that were in America for Federal Reserve System. 1914, the British Incorporated Cabinet just met to discuss how they are to give another incorporated entity, Marconi, which is GEC, or was, the monopoly on all wireless traffic to and from all British steamships around the world. Marconi had already supplied the Vatican with a wireless system before 1910. So the Vatican had been given the first system offered by Marconi. So obviously Marconi could then listen to everything that was going on in Vatican. Pope Pius did something good, but now they've given it a bit of attention and they're kicking his ass. So Vatican got it first, and then we incorporated it in 1914. The minutes for this meeting were taken down by the president of the Board of Trade, previous presidents being Lord Lloyd George and Winston Churchill. And then I've got a link to the Marconi scandal. I mean, of course, I'll put this link under the video after. On August the 5th, 1914, the communication cable between the United States and Germany was cut, forcing the Germans to use the wireless systems offered up by Marconi. Can you see this? Vatican, Britain, or England, and that Germans are all using Marconi or GECs. Yeah? Who's listening in? You see how these wars how they do it. It's so simple. You know, it's just needs a demented population. And a lot of people that think they're smart and clever to not really be smart and clever. You know, it's just ridiculous. On August 5th, 1914, so that scandal was a George and Winston Churchill scandal, yeah? And there's a link to it. On August the 5th, 1914, the communication cable, I've done that. Or was cut forcing the Germans. Yeah. So they had the monopoly. So when monopoly was coveted, monopoly is what the bankers had from the get go. If you've got monopoly over everybody's communications, you're listening in. Win. All day. Isn't it? You know? 1914, Charles Masterson started the War Propaganda Bureau. Right? 1914, Charles Masterson started the War Propaganda Bureau, or called the Ministry of Information. 1984, that, isn't it? In which they employed all the famous writers of the day to consistently lie in short stories about the Germans, to form the mindset for mass conscription. Yeah, like they're doing now with China. I'll say it again. When I looked into Wuhan, the US forces carpet bombed Wuhan before the end of the Second World War. Carpet bombed that area. And then I also found that members of the German paperclip scientists went to Wuhan. This is directly after the war. Right? It might be in China, but who runs it? And who's run it for a long time? Yeah? So what they did there with all this nonsense about putting Germany up on this pedestal of hatred, they're doing the same with Iran, they're doing the same with China, and they're doing the same with Russia. You know, you can see where they're going. 1914. Right, hang on. This bureau would control the minds of the nation throughout the war with the same lies. So they kept it going. They just don't stop doing it. Like they're doing with this pish. All the data says contrary to what you're getting on the media, but they just keep doing it. And because they keep doing it, and because people are obsessed with this play, that's what reality is, isn't it? Let's be honest. 1914, First World War begins. Men from all nations in Europe are slaughtered. This allowed for a huge movement of Zionist Jewry across Europe to take their seat in the lodges and societies without the natives able to respond because they were all out there. Most men were gone, leaving women, children, and the elderly. This is First World War. 1915, Britain was beat and ready to offer up surrender to the German forces. This was prevented by the House Rothschild, who persuaded the British government to allow the same House Rothschild to bring in the Americans to win the war on behalf of the British government. So the War Cabinet are blagging the British government to go for this deal because we were going to surrender in 1915, right? A year in. There's your pals, why they were all dead at the beginning. An achievable task, having secured the creation of the Federal Reserve 2 years earlier, positioning American money in the hands of the Bank of England, a Rothschild-owned central bank. As a payback, Britain had to publicly support the Rothschilds' move to secure the takeover of Palestine. The United States began to supply the British war effort. So they were blagged. We'll let you win, because, you know, the British Empire, we have to win, we'll do it by any means, blagging it, because that was my granddad's mentality. I mean, my granddad's mentality was really Imperial. You've never seen that like it. One of my grandfathers, anyway. The one that didn't go to war, interesting enough, the ones that did go to war, they weren't proud. They weren't Imperial at all. In fact, quite the contrary. So that's how I, you know. The United States began to supply the British war effort in 1915. So off we go. We're going to win. We're going to win because Uncle Rothschild's going to make sure, just like Uncle Rothschild made sure Wellington won. 1917, British Incorporated War Cabinet set up by Lloyd George consisted of 5 men. So this is the War Cabinet. None of which were members of Parliament. So the War Cabinet is going to dictate everything to our Parliament now, which is supposed to be a democracy, has just handed all its power over to this 5 men, a War Cabinet, none of which are members of Parliament. So none of them have been voted in. And they set up Wellington House to coordinate all propaganda from the end of the war to keep all nations on board with the coming carnival. Now, during the war, what they call in the War Cabinet was, in fact, the Propaganda Bureau, you know, the Ministry of Information. Yeah, so it's just shifted. But this time it shifted outside of our political control. They also utilised the post-traumatic state of demobbed soldiers to expand the Persian underworld networks, encouraging the war-torn youth. This group of 5 secret society knights of industry and commerce would control the entire war, with the government having no say whatever in any decisions taken from 1914. Nothing has changed from that year to today, only that governments are now incorporated and subject to the realm formed by this group, coordinated through the Round Table and its United Nations. Well, the Round Table is your Cecil Rhodes, your Milner, and before we were actually in existence before that. I forget the names offhand, but a very powerful elite. Now, the War Cabinet were made up of Earl Curzon, Viscount Milner, Lloyd George, Arthur Henderson, and Mr. Bonar Law. That was the War Cabinet running our entire game in the war and after, and still do today. Not the people, but the cabinet, the power. 1917, the United States entered the hot war. Britain lost all the patents and copyrights to the Federal Reserve System. So that's government-controlled patents, not inner-city controlled stuff, yeah? They always had a problem removing the government's play in anything the East India were doing until these kind of moves. This was the move that's changed that. The Templars military would move to the United States, allowing the city to focus on all things subversion via the Royal Society and the secret society networks, along with finance. So now you're seeing your science coming in, being forced in, and it all goes back to Royal Society and Frankfurt. 1917, the active arm of the Jewish Revolution, the Marxist Bolsheviks under Vladimir Ilyich Lenin and Leon Trotsky begins, and so to the slaughter of Russian Christians, eventually slaughtering by all horrendous means over 66 million Russian Christians. 1917, the religio-political script called Zionism and the second arm of the Jewish Revolution in play draft the Balfour Declaration, recognizing the right of Jews to a national home in their ancestral land. The language of the declaration inferred a British protectorate rather than a Jewish state, which they would only support if the Jews outgrew the Arab population, something the British consistently tried to prevent. Now, you don't get that. The Brits were consistently trying to move against this. But it was too late. They'd made the deal, or their predecessors had made the deal in 1915 to bring in the Americans. So this 1917 group, it started to cause problems because that was done against Britain, the Parliament side of things. 1918, the British War Cabinet decided to divide its propaganda house into 9 branches to further its cause. They also decided to privatise the Film and Cartography Group, Photo and Art, and the Commercial Intelligence Bureau in Madrid, handed it to the Federation of British Industries. In this move, they took full control of all the files and strategies formulated during the war out of the hands of the nation and into the realm of the secret societies. From this incorporation, they would form their own companies and attach them to the agenda of the propagandizing of the world with all the machinery of the British incorporated government. Cinematography license was also given to the Topical Film Company to continue the strategy of continuous small and well-placed lies in film, radio, and in the paper media to move the public to the script they wanted. 1918 again, the chief rabbi, now listen carefully to this. The chief rabbi of the British Empire in 1918, the Very Reverend J.H. Hertz, in answer to an inquiry on the Jewish question, said explicitly, the people known at present as Jews are descendants of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, with a certain number of descendants of the tribe of Levi. 1919, Abraham Isaac Cook was appointed the Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Jerusalem, and soon after as first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Palestine in 1921. With the outbreak of the First World War, caught Cook in Europe and was forced to remain in Switzerland and London for the remainder of the war. In 1916, he became rabbi of the Spitalfields Great Synagogue, Metzik Hadith, upholders of the law, an immigrant Orthodox community located in Brick Lane, Spitalfields, London, living at 9 Princeton Street, Spitalfields, Now, this obviously it becomes important at some point. 1920. After defeating the Ottoman Empire in World War I under Lawrence of Arabia, the region lacked a sovereign power. The San Remo Conference awarded the Brits control of the land on the condition they honour the Balfour Declaration and create a Jewish national home. So they had to get another blagging. And that was done under Lawrence of Arabia, yeah? To get the Brits to honour the Balfour Declaration. So they really weren't having it. 1920, Winston Churchill is given the mandate to enforce the Balfour Declaration by his father's elite Jewish circle. He was to form the path to a theft of land inhabited by Semitic peoples, or it was inhabited by Semitic peoples. 1920, Colonel Waters Taylor, British Field Marshal Allenby's chief of staff, met with Palestinian leader Hajj Amin al-Husseini a few weeks before Easter, which is 1920. He told al-Husseini he had a great opportunity at Easter to show the world that Zionism was unpopular, not only with the Palestinian administration, but in Whitehall, and if disturbances of sufficient violence occurred in Jerusalem at Easter, both General Bolz, chief administrator in Palestine, and General Allenby, commander of Egyptian force, 17th and 8th, 1919, then the High Commissioner of Egypt would advocate the abandonment of the Jewish home. So you've got here our British Field Marshal, Chief of Staff, so the big Englishmen here, this is Englishman, Waters Taylor, Field Marshal Allenby's. They've had enough already, these Zionists coming into Palestine. They're really not happy. So you can see, this was not a British thing. A bad bunch of politicians under great stress in war were blagged. But, when you go through that, you can see that it still weren't a done deal. There was still a lot of problems and people causing havoc, which you'll never get in any of the histories. I want you to think it were all fantastic, because God said. 1921, Britain reneges on the San Remo deal and gives converts 3/4 of mandatory Palestine to the Arab Emirates of Transjordan. Transjordan was then to remain under auspices of the British. So the Brits, the soldiers, the British Whitehall, they weren't playing along. They changed their mind and put loads of Arabs back in because they could see what was happening. And if you actually study it, it's ridiculous. They were torturing British soldiers. And all these leaders of these cells that were killing Brits and their own people became presidents of Israel, prime ministers. Come on. 1921, Colonel Richard Meinertzagen, former leader of British military intelligence in Cairo and later chief political officer for Palestine and Syria, wrote in his diary that British officials inclined towards the exclusion of Zionism in Palestine. So it wasn't the Jews that were causing the problems, it was the Zionists, and which has become the political class of Israel. So all your prime ministers, these Mossad, all these secret societies, they're not Jews, they're Zionisms. The Zionists, rather. I mean, they might claim to be Jews, but ultimately what they are is Zionists. 1922, Britain is ordered to take the mandate for Palestine by the League of Nations. Britain is ordered. You don't order it if it wanted to do it. It didn't want to do it. The military didn't want to do it. So it's ordered by the Rothschilds League of Nations, which were the forerunner to the United Nations, remember, until such time as the inhabitants of the land are able to stand alone. The awarding of the land was always on the condition they create a Jewish state. The Jewish national home is not created. Instead, some Jews are granted permission to apply for citizenship of mandatory Palestine. 1920s, Germany began to fear the Bolsheviks at the border after the horrors of genocide in Russia by the Jews, which was now an open secret. Germany and all European nations, including Britain, began to look for a strong leader to prevent the Bolsheviks expanding the revolution into Germany. So they say. Well, Hitler was a Bolshevik. He was a Bolshevik spy. And before he became chancellor, he was spying on these groups, these peoples, these rebels for the Bolsheviks in Russia. 1923, George Lukács, hero of the Frankfurt Group in early 1920s, the People's Commission for Education and Culture in Hungary, moved to subvert the morality of the populations to create a highly sexualized culture. He was beta testing the theories of culture and family subversion. Yeah. And they did that in the 1920s when they amalgamated the blues and swing and created jazz. And I have links on all these. I go through a report as to how they did that. And what they did then as well, when they set this place up called the Hotel Cecil, they invited all the American Masons in to debauch them with the Schofield twisted Zionist creed and then sent them back off. And then you've got born all this nonsense that they call evangelical Christianity. Okay. Now, in 1926, the Second Balfour Declaration was released, and by 1933, the American Jewish Committee moved the Frankfurt Group to America. When the Nazis came to power in Germany, most of the thinkers came to the United States, and many became influential in American universities. Its headquarters at Columbia. Frankfurt's critical theory became known as cultural Marxism, which is this race theory they're playing again. The coat of arms for Columbia University. Now, why does Israel hate Great Britain or England? The British Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden ferociously campaigns to block Jewish sovereignty. On the 26th of November 1937, he told the British ambassador in Washington he was looking for a solution which would not give Jews any territory exclusive for their use. So it was going badly, and the Brits knew it. 1938, the British government declares that its proposal in the Peel and Woodhead Commission to divide mandatory Palestine into two states is untenable. 1939, while unfettered Arab immigration swells made possible by Britain's unrestricted immigration policy for Arabs. So they were helping Arabs here. You Muslims, you better start to remember this, start to see this properly, what was going on. Because remember, Britain's not fighting Judaism, it's fighting this cult. At this time, the paper was issued, Jews are being subject to Nazi persecution in Europe. So it's all working together. You've got all this in Germany going on. Brits are saying, get stuff, we're not doing this. Hitler comes in, off they go. Can you see what's going down? 1945. In the run-up to the election of Arias Truman, he received death threats from Zionist terror groups working in Palestine to secure the Israel state. British government officials also received the same death threats. Truman would later receive a large suitcase of money, according to John F. Kennedy. 1941, Theodore Kaufman released the book titled Germany Must Perish. Did you hear that? 1941, Theodore Kaufman released the book titled Germany Must Perish, and I've linked to it, in which he advocates the total annihilation of the German race. From this script would be birthed the need for the camp deaths to have been a state-sponsored agenda. The evidence presents a reality opposite to the claim. So the death of the Germans was a plan by this cult. In 1945, General George Patton assassinated after recognizing the Semitic aims enforced through Bolshevism against the German race, coordinated by Morgenthau and Baruch to completely destroy it and replace it with a race of Mongol savages. Paraphrased from his letters sent to his friends during 1945 in the run-up to his death in December. Patton would have been a serious problem for the birth of Israel, hence the first attempt on his life while he was in the air, because he was a pilot, he was flying Spitfires, and he was attacked in the air by a Polish Spitfire. Tried to kill him first before they actually got away with him. 1945, the Allied commanders were successful in expanding the Bolshevik territory to almost half the European landmass because they handed over to the Soviet Union, did they not? The Jewish Soviet Union was born, and from which new global intelligence program is moved against the world, fronted by the Soviet-formed Israel. 1946, the then British Palestine commander, Lieutenant General Evelyn Barker, issued an order banning British troops from socialising with Jews. He went on to say, "We will be punishing the Jews in a way the race dislikes as much as any by striking at the pockets and showing our contempt of them." In a letter to a lover, he wrote, "Yes, I love the lot, whether they be Zionists or not. Why should we be afraid of saying we hate them? It's time this damn race knew what we think of them, loathsome people. This came on the back of the murder and torture of British soldiers by the Jewish terror groups. They also slaughtered many Jews to gain global sympathy that they still ride today after slaughtering Arabs and Christians in the Middle East." And links to the Sergeant's affair and a poisonous legacy. And as I've said, this is not the Jews, this is this cult system that they're fighting. Everybody's, and today, of course, we just say it's Jews when there's a lot more to know. Now, I think we've done there. I've waffled on enough, and when I look, I bet it's 2 hours and something. Oh, yeah. So, I hope that gives an insight, because it does touch on points that people fail to recognise, and it might just help people realise that basically we're all let off the hook. Because you can be a Jew, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Christian, and it doesn't mean that the guilt that they've thrown on you, this cult, is yours. It's not. It belongs to the cult. And with that, people, I will say, till the next time.